therapist. All right, loss. It's not a fun topic to talk about. I know it's not a fun topic to talk about. Here's why I think it's so critical that we do talk about it. Every single one of us experiences loss. None of us get out of it. And so it becomes important to understand what loss is and what the heck are we supposed to do with it. So, here are some reasons that we tend to avoid the topic of loss. It's uncomfortable. It's not a fun topic to talk about. It might be that you have no idea what to say, either with your own loss experience or with someone that you love and care about. I have no clue what to say to them. It's just easier not to talk about it. It might be that you don't see anybody else struggling with loss, even if others have experienced the same loss that you've gone through. They aren't struggling, so it must be me. I must be making this a bigger deal than it really is. I shouldn't be struggling with this. And so we stay silent. And it could be that you step into comparative suffering. This is a very common occurrence. Comparative suffering is comparing your loss to other people's loss. And we can, if we're honest, we can all find someone who's had a more significant loss than we've had. And so when we step into comparative suffering, we minimize our loss. And if that's our viewpoint, if we're being honest, only one person in all of the world has a valid loss, because we would have to identify the only person who had the truly significant loss, right? So we step into comparative suffering and we say, my loss isn't as significant as what someone else has lost. So it's not valid. It's not important for me to speak up, or it's not even okay for me to speak up because someone else has experienced something so much more significant. So these are some reasons we avoid talking about loss. I want to move next to just the definition of what loss is. Let's be clear on this. Loss is when you are deprived of someone or something that you value. That's the definition. Someone or something that you value. You are deprived of that thing. Okay. So in the definition, we learn why loss is such a unique experience. It is based on what we value. And each of us, for a variety of reasons, our experiences, our upbringing, our age, we value different things. And because of that, your loss experience is going to be unique. That is an important point to understand. It's not necessarily going to look like anybody else's loss experience. So, let's go through some simple examples to kind of point out how what we value can make a difference in our loss experience. So, consider the loss of a pet. For one person, this is going to be a devastating loss. Their pet was like a family member to them. And for someone else, maybe even in the same family, they tolerated the pet, but wasn't really their thing. And so they don't experience anywhere near the same level of loss when a pet dies. Consider selling your house. For one person, it may not feel like that big of a deal. There may be excitement about the next step, whatever that is. And for someone else, they could be excited and feel loss at the loss of the memories that this house has held, all the experiences. Maybe they had a part in designing and building this house. So there, again, can be very different experiences depending on what it is we value. So breakups, and this could be a romantic breakup, a divorce, it could be friendships or family members. But when a relationship ends, depending on the value of that relationship, we can see a unique difference in the loss experience. When we have life transitions, like when you become an empty nester. Now, some of you may be loving this phase of life. Some of you are counting down the days until this phase of life. But even with excitement, there can be loss, a significant loss of identity. I am no longer actively parenting my children. There can be significant loss in this experience. Changes in life. You're no longer able to drive, and that might be due to an accident or age, but you've lost the ability to drive. That can create significant loss for people. If they really value their freedom, value their independence, this can be a really big deal, while for others, it may not feel like such a big deal. When you lose your sense of security, a lot of us experienced this during the COVID pandemic, where we didn't know how long it was going to last. We didn't know how bad it was going to get. And our normal was no longer normal. So we lost our sense of security. When we go through trauma, there is often a loss in a variety of different ways when we experience a traumatic event. Even simple things like deciding to let go of a coping mechanism. And I'm going to use Diet Coke as the example here. If you're a Diet Coke lover, I'm not speaking ill of Diet Coke, just using this as an example. If you've decided Diet Coke for A, B, C, and D is no longer something you want in your life, and you decide it's time to let it go, it may seem really trivial or insignificant, shouldn't be a big deal, right? Except, what was the value of Diet Coke? So it certainly could have had emotional value to you. This is how I self-soothed. This is how I rewarded myself. It could have social value. This is what I would drink when I hung out with friends or when I had these other experiences. So even something that feels insignificant can still be a loss. Now, of course, your timeline, how you move through this loss, can vary greatly. So for some of these experiences, it might be a couple of days. For other experiences, it could be a couple of months or a couple of years. Each loss experience is unique. All right. So our loss experience is based on what it is that we value. And no one else gets to tell you what it is that you value. So that's important to remember, just as you don't get to tell other people what is a valid loss or what they should value. These are important pieces to remember. We need to honor our own losses and acknowledge and honor other people's losses. So, our loss is an experience where you are deprived of someone or something that you value, period. When you have that experience, it is a valid loss. Valid. When you experience loss, please do not minimize your own loss. Acknowledge that it is a legitimate, valid loss. Please do not compare your loss to what other people have lost. I'm going to talk about this in just a second, but stepping into comparison invalidates, minimizes, or minimizes your loss, or you could be potentially minimizing the other person's loss. Please don't keep it hidden. An important part of moving through loss, healing from loss, is sharing your experience. And please don't avoid grief. So grief is the internal emotional experience we have when we experience loss. And it can be made up of many different emotions: anger, sadness, loneliness, rejection, fear, anxiety. There are a lot of things that could go into grief. Again, moving through loss, it's important for you to connect with, experience, and express your grief. When you experience loss, please do validate your own loss. It is legitimate. It is real. Use and instead of but. So if I'm talking about someone, or if I'm talking with someone who I know has experienced loss, it's sharing, I'm struggling with, or I'm sad about my loss, and I'm really sad about, or I'm heartbroken over what you've experienced. It's not but, it's and. So acknowledging that both people's experiences are valid. Please share. You don't need to share it with a ton of people. One or two people that you trust, that you feel emotionally connected to. Share your loss experience and acknowledge your grief. Allow it to be expressed.